Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Ryan and Megan podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about full-time versus part-time contracts as a traveler.
Welcome in, everybody, to the Ryan and Megan podcast. We are
Ryan
and Megan, and we are two traveling physical therapists. We travel with our family. We have a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old, and we are just sharing the experience here with you and hopefully giving you a few tips along the way. So today we're talking about the difference between a full-time contract and a part-time contract. We're taking our first part-time contract coming up here in about a month and a half. So we thought it was an appropriate time to address a few of the differences that we noticed.
Before we hop into anything, if you could, please leave us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, consider hitting that like button and subscribing just so our videos do a little bit better and we know that you're out there listening.
Yeah.
All right. So what we need to know, what episode is this? This is episode 31.
31.
Wow.
That's a lot.
We're getting there.
Wow.
But what you need to know for full-time, part-time PT work.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we should probably just kind of go over like understanding what that even means.
Yep. So we're talking about contract physical therapy, not PRN, not like part-time at a permanent place.
Travel contracts.
And typically a full-time contract PT is expected to be working 40 hours a week. You usually can talk about that in your interview and figure out, are they needing a full 40 hours? Will they guarantee me 40 hours? But just know you're typically looking at 30 to 40 hours a week to be full-time, probably 36 hours
so
to be considered full-time, actually.
Each travel company is going to be a little bit different, and we'll kind of get into like this is going to be benefits for full-time, but a lot of times they want you to be like 36 or above. Some places are 32 and above. So
usually all of the contract companies that we have worked through, so all of the travel recruiters and the companies, they offer health benefits as a full-time therapist. So you've got your medical, eye, dental, all of that you can opt into. And
retirement plans, some have 401ks you can be a part of.
Sick time, not usually PTO. And then you're also going to have set productivity standards, which is typical to talk about also during the interview. And that changes based on which company you're working for.
Yeah, really one of the biggest differences for the part-time contract PT is that your hours are going to be different, which kind of changes your pay. And we'll talk about that here in a second.
Mm-hmm.
But typically part-time, you're looking at about 30 hours or less. And so for our case, we were looking at a contract in our home state. I was going to work full-time 40 hours, and Megan was interested in seeing if we could do a part-time gig. And so you're working 3 days a week. And how many hours did that end up coming out? 24. So under that 30-hour mark. Now, because she's only working 24 hours, she's not eligible to opt into the benefits that the travel company offers. So, can't run her health insurance through her, no retirement stuff. So those benefits go away. Very similar to how a permanent job would be if you work part-time or full-time.
Yep. Exactly. So pretty basic in the differences. You're just looking at less hours. And
we have heard people looking for part-time travel contracts, like couples. So say like Megan and I both working a part-time contract. And so we kind of
make up one full-time PT.
Yeah, we kind of equal one full-time equivalent PT is how they would put that on their books. And so I thought that was kind of unique, if you work 3 days and I work 2.
Yeah. So kind of looking at taking a part-time contract could give you a little bit more flexibility if you are a team and you both still want to work, but you want to have some time off in the week to work on a side project or to go see things. Or if you're able to both get a part-time contract at separate locations. If they're willing to take part-time PTs, then you could work the same hours, but only work part-time and go travel a little bit more while you're out. So the reason why we were looking at part-time is just because our childcare wanted to be working part-time, and I haven't worked for about 2 years. So jumping back into a
Caseload.
full-time position and caseload would be fine, but it was just a little intimidating, and I prefer to have more time with my kids. So part-time was something that kind of made sense for us, and it ended up working out. And we should probably talk about how it ended up, the whole process ended up looking like for us, like how we got to the point with the company of getting a part-time contract.
Yeah, so we knew kind of going in that they had 2 openings for 2 full-time PT travel jobs at the same home health company. And so we applied for those jobs and we got an interview, so a travel interview. And Megan and I were both on the interview, and we
Fun
always
fact.
we always say that you should just simply ask. We knew that they were really needing people at this job, and so we said, "Hey, would it be okay if Ryan worked full time? Would you guys still be interested if Megan could only do like 3 days a week? Would you be interested in having her just for 3 days a week?" Because on these travel interviews, as you'll learn, it's kind of us interviewing them in a certain sense to try to figure out what's going on, what is the place like, what does it look like, what are your needs, and so then that was one of our questions that we asked. Would you be interested in that? And they
Mhm.
were very open to it. They're like, yeah, we'll take we'll take a 1.5 PT if we can,
Mhm.
because we're just needing some help for some coverage.
Yeah. So at least for us, the step of figuring out whether we could do full or part-time happened after we had gotten the interview. And the interview wasn't necessarily for a part-time position. So I think maybe that would differ a little bit if you were a single traveler and you were interviewing for a job where obviously they're wanting a full-time PT. Your recruiter might have some insight as to whether they're open to less hours, if they've had previous travelers there and they kind of are more acquainted with the location. Um, but typically, I don't think you would be looking at the job market for a part-time position. You would probably be looking for full-time positions, and you would have to feel out and ask the facility during the interview what they would be comfortable with.
I do think that it's a little easier if you're a team traveling or a couple traveling and one of you wants to be part time or both of you want to be part time and kind of asking that. If you're a solo traveler, a lot of times they are looking for full time hours. So if they have you wanting part time and someone else who's willing to be full time, then they're probably going to pick the full time person who's interviewing. So just be cautious of that. I think it would be a little tougher, but it doesn't hurt to ask, like, hey, would you be interested in
Yeah, and
this?
I think there's always irregularities in the different locations because we always say typically a contract is 13 weeks because that is the typical standard. But a lot of times we see contracts even listed for 8 weeks or 6 weeks or 4 weeks or 6 months, you know. So there are things that are different at each location and sometimes it just takes talking to them to figure it out.
Yeah.
So on to kind of the next little segment we wanted to cover was what is different in the actual paperwork and in the actual contract that you're signing as a part-time therapist compared to full-time. And really, there are more similarities than there are differences.
Yeah. I thought it'd be a lot different to set up a part time contract, but it really wasn't. It was just some fine print, same travel therapy contract that you would normally do as a full time traveler. Um, there's just going to be less hours written in there
Mhm.
and less work shifts. And so that changes your pay structure a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, so I still have a like 30-day cancellation window. So if I were to cancel or if they were to cancel my contract, I still have that 30-day heads up. They can't just kind of terminate me in one day just because I'm part-time.
The pay is very structured and I think dependable. So just like a full time travel contract, you're gonna be
I have guaranteed
you're
hours
going to have
listed.
guarantee hours listed. It's
Mhm.
just for a smaller amount. So
Yeah.
you can kind of plan, at least for that 3-month chunk.
And if you don't understand what guaranteed hours are, we've talked about them before, but um, when you're guaranteed hours on your contract and you sign it, it means that you will always be paid for that minimum set of hours. So we love to get 40 hours when we're working a 40-hour contract. That's been a little bit harder recently, but for me, it's going to be 24 hours guaranteed. So whether they have that or not on any given week, they will be paying me for 24 hours.
Other than that, the pay structure is really kind of the biggest thing that differs
Mhm.
because of the per diems and stipends that you get as a traveler. So that shuffles around, and that kind of pushes us into kind of how the pay structure is different for part-time contracts, that segment.
Yeah. So before we jump into that, if you are looking at getting into travel therapy, let us know in our email at ryanandmeganorear@gmail.com. We'd love to give you some recruiter recommendations for recruiters that we know and that have been wonderful because they can really help make your experience great, especially when you're first starting and it's all kind of new, but also just having a great team along for the ride to look out for you, look for the best jobs is extremely helpful. So, look in the show notes. We should have a link, or you can always email us again at ryanandmeganorear@gmail.com.
Yep, you click that link and it takes us to our website and just a little form there to fill out. Lets us get to know you a little bit better so we can connect you with the recruiter we feel like you fit best with. All of the recruiters we personally use and trust. So if you're interested in starting travel, check that out.
Yeah. So, let's get into how the pay is different as far as how it's allocated on your paycheck. That's the biggest.
Or in your travel therapy contract, how it's going to be written up
Yeah.
on how they're going to pay you.
It's a little bit different. So, a standard pay package is made up of an hourly rate that is taxed and then of per diems and stipends that is not taxed. And there is typically a cap on how much of your money can be given to you in the per diems and in the stipends. So, for a full time therapist, they kind of just take that cap and they split it up evenly by 5 shifts because that's typically what you're working or 40 hours. And then whatever is left of your pay will get paid hourly. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
But when you're working fewer than 5 shifts or fewer than 40 hours a week, um, now there's a little bit of wiggle room to try and give you the maximum amount of pay in stipends and in per diems without reaching or going over that cap.
Yes. No, that's perfect. And why, if you're asking why would they want to give you more in per diems and stipends, is because that income is tax free. So you don't have to pay taxes on it. So the more they can shuffle into that bucket, the less taxes you pay, more money in your pocket. Now, the limit that they're running up against is set by the IRS, depending on your area, all this different stuff. So they're very travel companies are very good travel companies and good recruiters are very cautious on not overloading you with that and just giving you an hourly rate of like $5 an hour. That would send up red flags to the IRS. So there's rules that have to kind of be followed. And so typically like our hourly pay, probably the lowest we would go is maybe close to like 18 to 20 bucks. But as you get to work higher paying travel contracts, once that per diem fills up, then they have to start raising up your hourly.
Mhm.
So with a part-time contract, they can shuffle over a little bit more into per diems and thus lower your hourly closer to that $20 range where you're not
Mhm.
setting off any red flags.
Right.
And this is all off physical therapy, but most of the other allied professionals are very similar in their pay structure. And so when Megan and I signed our contracts, they looked a little different. My
Mhm.
per diem was the max they could give me for 5 days of working per week. And then my hourly was closer to like $26 per hour. Megan's, her hourly was more like $20 per hour, but her per diem for those 3 days that she's contracted to work was higher than my per diem per day. But she's only getting per diems for 3 days.
Mhm.
Now,
That is a difference. Per diems and stipends are paid per day.
mhm,
Sometimes that differs by different companies, doesn't it? Like if you work 3 days, you're paid out 3 days, but if sometimes it can be like if you work a certain number of hours, then that bumps you up and qualifies you for like 4 days or something like that. So that might be a difference based on how your travel company does it, but how we have it set up for this contract, it's by day. So that's why they give me a higher number of stipends to kind of max that out since I'm working fewer days.
now in your travel contract, it kind of locks you in. So if you're working a part-time contract, if you have set where I'm going to work 3 days a week, 8-hour days, I'm going to get per diems for 3 days. If you pick up another day and work a fourth day, a lot of times they're not able to give you a stipend for that fourth day, a majority of the
Because you
time,
would break your cap.
because you would break the cap that they can give you. So you can work that fourth day. You're just not going to get your stipend. You're just going to make your hourly. So if you have a really low hourly,
Your hourly is going to be low.
$20 per hour, then an 8-hour day might not be worth it.
Mhm.
So something to think about. Each travel company does it a little bit differently, but that is typically what it is. It's kind of set to those 3 days. So something to think about for sure.
Mhm. You will typically for overtime work, if you are a full-time therapist, that means when you're working over 40 hours. For this contract,
Getting paid time and a half.
right.
Mm.
For this contract, being paid overtime for me, I would have to work over 36 hours. And they have changed my overtime hourly to be a more accurate hourly rate. So instead of 20, it's like, I don't know, 67 or something.
70, yeah, around there.
Yeah. So they do kind of bump that up for you if you do hit that overtime cap, but I'd have to work over 36, which is picking up
Yeah,
an extra
quite a
shift at
bit,
that low pay.
quite a bit at 24 hours per week. If you worked like a 4-day week, I could see you hitting up against that a little bit more.
Mhm.
But the other thing is a lot of times these facilities that you're going to go work at, they don't necessarily want their travelers working overtime because our time and a half is uh, they pay us a lot.
Mhm.
They're already paying us a lot because we're there at a premium, but they really don't want us to go over. So in your contract, it usually says something like you got to have written consent from your facility, your clinical supervisor, or whoever is in charge of you. So a lot of times they don't let you go overtime unless they're just really needing you, and then they got to approve it.
Mhm. So bottom line, there are legal limits on how much a weekly paycheck can go toward your tax-free per diems. And this means that your take-home hourly rate is going to be a lot lower. And if you pick up hours as a part-time therapist, that low rate is going to be paid on that extra shift. So you may not be able to scale your income by picking up shifts as you regularly would as a full-time therapist.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And I'm sure you can talk with your recruiter to kind of figure out, is there anything you can do about if I pick up a shift here and there? Can we change the pay structure for that week? But probably not a normal thing to change constantly. Hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, no, I think that's all very good. We'll kind of go into our next segment here, considerations before choosing a contract. So, if you're thinking about doing a part-time contract, can obviously consider your financial planning. So you're going to be working less hours, you're going to be making less money than if you work full-time. So you got to really look into that. Also, you might be doing it for a work-life balance. That's kind of what we're doing it for. So Megan can slowly get back into work a little bit, and then also still be home with the girls. So kind of taking advantage. We're kind of on the financial planning the other way, having her work a little bit so we can make some more money. But we're not wanting to give up all of our work-life balance of her being home with the girls. Your career goals. Where I've seen this career goals thing work would be if you're taking a part-time contract, maybe back in your tax home or somewhere where you've been, but then you're also going to work like a PRN job on the weekends. in maybe a different setting, maybe like in the hospital compared to home health during the week. So it might be a career thing of, hey, I want to try these few different things. And so how do I knock out as many as I can? So that's definitely an option for you.
I would say another consideration is just healthcare because if you're traveling on your own and you're responsible for your healthcare coverage, you won't have that option if you're wanting to take a part-time contract. And so you'll have to figure out what are you going to do about that. You won't have your regular option of just opting in with your company. So there are other options, and we have some episodes and some previous YouTube videos on that. There's plenty of options out there, but you'll just have to research that and figure out what avenue you would want to go down. So
Great.
I think that kind of closes it up on what part-time versus full-time is. Basically pretty similar, just a little bit of a difference in the pay structure. I would say double check your contract for things like the hourly guarantee and the cancellation window.
Yeah.
But
I was really actually pretty shocked on how easy it was, and
discuss it during your interview.
how similar it was to just a normal PT contract. It was just we were just changing up some of the hours and language in the travel contract.
Yep.
Obviously, if the job market's looking good and there's options out there, then I'm sure facilities are going to be a little bit more willing to take whoever they can get, even if you're part-time. If your disciplined job market is a little bit more competitive, they might be looking more full-time. But part-time work is possible. We know travelers who have done it. We're going to be doing it this next go around. So if we have any updates on it, we'll let you know.
And don't forget that some facilities might be looking for that. I don't think it's the most common thing, but we said discuss it during the interview, but you might already know going in that that's what they're wanting because that could be out there as well. So ask your recruiters, keep an eye out for it, and hope this was helpful.
Until next time,
see ya.